Welcome back. House Republicans announced their tax reform plan on Thursday this past week, making good on President Trump's campaign trail pledge to cut the corporate tax rate from 35% all the way down to 20%. It is no secret that major corporations were hoping for a lower rate, but Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg was very clear in our exclusive interview. This won't just help his company. He believes it's going to have a broad-based impact in helping America.
I think tax reform is extremely important to this country. I would say that tax reform is the single most important thing we can do to generate jobs growth in the U.S., the single most important thing we can do to energize economic growth. I know things like a 20% corporate tax rate will allow us to be more competitive in the global marketplace. That's what our competitors enjoy today around the world. And when we're more competitive, we win in the marketplace, and that allows us to invest and grow for the future. You know, aerospace is a great trade surplus sector for the U.S. And in a time when we're concerned about trade deficits, aerospace generates an $80 billion a year trade surplus for the country. That translates into jobs. Boeing's a big part of that surplus, and we have more than 13,000 medium and small businesses in our supply chain in the U.S., 1.5 million manufacturing jobs as part of that supply chain.
That's a really important point, because as one boat lifts, all boats are lifted, actually, when you consider all of the other companies that are impacted by what Boeing is doing, by the way.
Absolutely. That's why things like corporate tax reform are so important. It certainly benefits big companies like Boeing, but even more importantly, it benefits our supply chain, those medium and small businesses where a lot of the job generation is happening. And corporate tax reform will allow us to invest for the future, make additional capital investments, and continue to grow and win in the marketplace. You know, every year we're adding capabilities here in the U.S. About 90% of our Boeing jobs are here in the U.S., even though we export 80% of what we do. That's a phenomenal opportunity for us as we invest in aerospace.
I don't know that people understand that. That's a really important point, actually. Now there's also trade policy that I want to talk to you about. I mean, the president's getting high marks for his economic policy, certainly when it relates to taxes. What about trade? What do you want to see differently? I mean, one of your competitors, Bombardier, we know what happened there. Washington slapped a 300% trade tariff on Bombardier, accusing the Canadian aerospace firm of both receiving state aid and potentially dumping its new plane on the U.S. market. Is that what happened, Dennis? And do you fear in any way? I mean, I know this was a competitor. They got this 300% tariff. But do you fear that if we see tariffs like that, we are going to be in danger of a trade war?
Well, I think the key here is that we have to understand we operate in a globally competitive environment. And in that environment, and in an attractive market like aerospace, it's important that everybody play by the same rules. And that's simply the case here in the Bombardier matter. And as you pointed out, this was a case where government subsidies were evident, dumping behavior was evident. Those are counter to international trade rules. We're certainly happy to compete. In fact, we love to compete. Competition makes us better. But it's also important that we all play by the same rules. And so when we think about global trade policy, that's really the fundamental underpinning. Let's make sure everybody around the world plays by the same rules. When we do that, we'll compete and win.
Let me get to Iran for a moment, Dennis, because this is an important point. Obviously, you have an agreement to sell 80 new planes to Iran Air and another 30 to Iranian carrier Aseman, the total value $20 billion. Look, you've done incredibly well, but you're selling these planes to Iran. The president has made no secret of the fact that he doesn't want this deal. If he cancels the nuclear deal, does that business go away? How do you walk this balance of having a big business and you know, with Iran and the president seeing them as an enemy?
Yeah, I think the key here again is to step back and look at this as a globally competitive marketplace, and the opportunity in Iran is a big one. It's an important one. But we also know that this is strictly guided by U.S. government policy, strict licensing policies that we followed from day one. And so we're going to continue to follow the U.S. government's lead here. And while it's an important market for us, it's also important that we stay fully aligned with U.S. government. We're going to continue to do that. The good thing is we're playing in a strong overall global marketplace, and while demand in Iran is one important element, the global marketplace is much bigger. So that provides us some financial protection from a company standpoint. But it's also important when we look at Iran that there are other competitors that are interested in operating there as well. And again, it's important that everybody who tries to compete in Iran has to play by the same rules.